This is the July 10th, 2008 meeting of the Athens Shade Tree Commission. The meeting will now come to order. Our first order of business is commission appointments, and we have some new faces on the commission, and we're very grateful for City Council and the mayors having moved this through quickly for us. We have a new commissioner, Jared DeForest, who is in environmental and plant biology.
That's correct.
Assistant professor at Ohio University. And a new alternate, John Katowski, who is retiring from facilities management at Ohio University. That's not quite accurate, is it?
Close.
Okay. And then Lee Gregg has moved to an alternate position from the full membership on the commission. And David Sinkoff has her place. He was previously an alternate. If you can follow all this. So we have new blood. And some of the old commissioners are still in place. So thank you very much for joining us. The second order of business is tree permit activity and right-of-way issues, trees in the right-of-way. We have a tree permit from, let's see, Dick Planasek, who requested removal of a dead tree at 8 Forest. And Ann, did people ever get to see this?
I went to look at it.
I did not see it.
It's an interesting site because there's a number of small evergreens near that tree that I think would benefit from its removal.
Yeah.
It has a blue dot on it from AEP, but it isn't a very big tree, but it may be too big for the city to remove.
Yeah.
So I'd certainly recommend that it be removed.
Okay.
But I think it's a site where some careful pruning. I mean, I think if Ron Lucas went to it, he could probably figure out what the best thing to do is, and maybe with your help out as
Okay,
well.
well, and maybe AEP would be willing. They're in town, so this is the time
Yeah.
to...
I did send an email and a follow-up phone message to Ron Lucas in the Streets Department, who is our arborist, asking if he could use his diplomatic contact with AEP to perhaps see whether they could remove, since probably the blue blaze on the base has something to do with
It
its...
doesn't seem to have any sign of life, so I think even my lay opinion is sufficient to say that it's probably dead.
We can't identify what kind of tree it is, but it's definitely dead. So. Okay, well, that will...
and there's other small trees in there that I think, the site would benefit from some cleaning up.
Yeah, that's true. It's a stunning Virginia creeper and poison ivy concentration. The other tree, and we asked Ann to look at this one, two of them actually, at 32 East State Street, where property owner Mick Bolin asked that they be either pruned or removed. Difficulty with both the trees being in telephone and cable lines and one pushing up a sidewalk. So Ann, what was your assessment, please?
Okay, well, I did send an email out kind of outlining, they're not great trees. This is probably the third time that we've been called out to look at these trees, because understandably they're big and the sidewalk is not very big. I think they're structurally sound, and I think I kind of probably more eloquently said in my email that these are trees that are not replaceable. Once they go, they're done, and we won't have any more trees there. It's just a real high traffic site. Takes a beating. You can tell by all the soil compaction, all the other compromising issues at the site. So, as I've said the other times when this has come up, I've recommended that we keep the trees and maybe explore some options for fixing the sidewalk. It's one thing to cut the trees down, but then you still have to deal with the sidewalk, whether the tree's there or not. And there's so many technologies available. So I think I sent that out to everybody, but I don't know. I haven't talked to the property owner yet.
Commissioners Lee.
And as we learned at one of your wonderful tree care conferences, when sidewalks heave up like that or disturbed, it looks like the roots, but actually those usually have reached the end of the struts of the sidewalk's lifespan, and they are shifting, allowing oxygen, and so the tree roots do enter, but it's not the tree's fault.
Yeah. I mean, the trees certainly could be taken advantage of,
Sure.
probably, inadequate construction or old age in the sidewalk, or But the other thing too is the damage is done. Those are, trees are like people. When they're young, they grow fast, but then hopefully we slow down and don't grow as much as they're older. And so I think this would be a perfect site to explore maybe rubber sidewalks or some of the newer technologies, using asphalt ramping or anything like that. So I just hate to lose, those are probably the top trees. Once they're gone, there's no, it'd be hard to get some going back there.
Is there anybody
Can I
else?
ask what council's position is in terms of assisting people with sidewalks like that? They're in a prominent place in the city.
We don't currently have any guidelines, I don't believe.
Because that, I think it is such a well-trafficked site, and it's just a very wide sidewalk.
I can look into that.
It isn't, we're not dealing with a residential area with a regular sidewalk.
Right.
We're dealing with a pretty special area here.
There was the precedent, limited as it may be, when there was interest in having a sidewalk going to Home Street, the library. The city did pay for that.
And that was engineered to go around trees.
Yes. So we know that we have the technology. We can do it. So that'd be a nice way, I think, to help that property owner, without, because I can certainly see why he or she are complaining about it.
Did you note the species at all, the trees?
Yeah,
They're maple?
I really don't want to say on TV.
Okay.
Really.
Not one of the top ones on our preferred list.
No.
The street tree of Athens, however.
Yes.
Okay. Are
There
there
is
any,
no perfect tree.
Yeah,
So.
I'm happy to keep them.
is there anybody who wants removal?
No.
So, all right, we will, the tree permit will be given to the Service Safety Director's office with the commission denying removal and pruning. I think was also, those are telephone and cable lines, which are
Yeah, there's
not
a lot of
problem.
misconceptions about trees and utilities, and I didn't see, maybe we could look at that again. I think right now, I thought the bigger issue
Yeah.
was the sidewalk. I didn't see any huge issues in the crown that need, any hazards or anything like that, but we could certainly look at it again and help them.
It doesn't have the AEP high voltage cables.
Yeah,
anywhere near
it's,
it.
okay. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be necessary, any pruning either, I don't think. Well, all right, we will send that to the Service Safety Director's office for action. And there was one other tree in the right-of-way issue that was a leftover from last time, and Ann had brought it to our attention, and it's on the corner of Congress and Lancaster near the Mount Zion Baptist Church. I think the address is 85 North Congress, and it's a yellow wood frame house with a
Oh, that's right, yeah,
declining sugar maple. And your assessment, or have you had a chance to assess it?
I did look at it. We're seeing, a lot of tree decline all around town, and it's just one that I don't think it's going to come back. I think much of the life is in the Virginia creeper, the poison ivy that's growing up.
Yeah.
It's a tree we've worked on in the past. I know we've done
we
some
did a
pruning on
pruning.
it over the years. You guys might want to look at it. The good news about dead wood is, with all these heavy storms, usually the dead wood stays in the tree at this stage. It's the live, heavy branches that break off. So, I think we got some time to look at it.
Okay, so if people would go and look, the address is 85 North Congress. I didn't have that before. Are there any other tree permit or right-of-way issues that other people have? Okay. Item 3 on the agenda, the landscape ordinance issues, and we had one that was sent by, Steve Pearson. That was 6 and 8 Kern Street. Do people have their copies of 6 and 8 Kern? Steve, send us down that way. Anybody else need a copy? Oahu? Okay. All right, who would like to comment first?
The first question I had was, is this one site or is it two?
Okay, is there somebody here representing the property owner at 6 and 8 Kern Street? No? All right.
It may not be too material, but under the new ordinance, because of rounding and so on, you could finish up with a difference of one tree, depending on how the site is apportioned. I visited the site. There's a couple of trees on the north side of it which are adjacent to the road that runs around the side of the senior centre there.
Yeah, heritage
I don't
commons.
think they should be considered as part of this development. They are part of that roadway. There were some existing trees on the site. They're behind, I think it's, what's its number?
6, I think.
6. Kern Street. There's a pair of trees. Those are too close together to be considered as two trees. Under the new landscape ordinance, they need to be 30 feet apart to be considered as two separate trees. So we should consider those, I think, as one tree existing. And I believe that is it in terms of existing trees. The rest of it is going to require new trees to be planted. And they need, I think,
2 more?
a total of 4 trees to each site. I think that's the way I worked it out, if they're separate sites. And as I say, there might be a difference of 1 tree in there if it's one site. And the owner can decide where to put those trees. I think it would be best to put them on the front, if possible.
On Kern
There's
Street?
not a lot of room in
Yeah,
the
there's
front.
not a lot of space there.
No.
The best planting sites seem to be between the houses and behind.
Yeah.
The 2 trees, although they're very close together, there is quite a canopy coming
Yeah,
from.
yeah. I mean,
from
they
them.
should really take efforts to save those 2 trees because,
Yeah.
as I say, we should count one of them, I think, as a tree in this case.
Anybody else have comments from their visit to the site?
Why can't the walnuts count? Why would you say that the walnuts on the
Because
north
they're
side-
not on the property.
Oh, they're not on the property.
They're in,
Okay.
they belong to that street. Now, sometimes when trees have been planted close to a property line in the right of way, that's a reason to maybe leave it there as and allow it as part of it. But not in this case. I don't think that they are close enough.
But we're hoping that that will stay.
They should.
They
certainly-
should
yes,
stay.
yeah, certainly. If they were lost during development, they'd be expected to replace them.
And this is the property line indication. This
Is that it? Okay.
black dash.
I see.
So it is outside.
Uh,
I think because of the amount of crown that's coming from the 4 trees, they're actually going to have a hard time finding that many sites. But clearly behind the houses is the best. I didn't see any out front looked pretty
Out
tight.
front, it's really tight.
Yeah. And I wasn't sure if they were going to use between the houses as an access to the parking, or it doesn't look like it.
No, it doesn't
If
look
they're
like it.
keeping
So-
those trees, they would be in the way of access.
Because right now there's a lot of construction traffic going down between the houses, but
So we would,
Yeah. No, I mean, the way I did it, I took the 2 trees that they'd got at the front, the 2 trees that they have in the middle, and then added 3 trees at the back, so equally spaced, and that would then make up the tree requirement, and they would be more than 30 feet apart. That would do it. I think if they can put them there. I think I had a question actually about that as to whether that was a city right of way or not, because I couldn't figure it out from the property line. Do you know the property line at the back there?
this would be the property line right here.
Okay, that's the property line then.
Yeah.
There is space to put the trees in that in there.
Yeah, okay. Well, are people comfortable with that possibility? It's conceivable when they start working on the site, other things may happen, but 3 more trees, and
Well,
these are
it'll
suggested
be
locations.
4 trees to each one.
Would this front corner be a possibility for a tree?
I thought there might have been enough space there if they wanted to.
if it was back kind of between the houses rather than in
Yeah.
front,
There's enough room here.
Yeah.
it's very compacted there.
But compaction can be dealt with.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it can.
Shall we make some, give them a menu of trees to choose from to help them along? People have been to the site. What kinds of recommendations? Emily's are. Sorry to put you on the spot, Emily, but
Ed is here.
Well, I haven't seen the site, though. I'm hesitant to say anything.
The black walnuts are doing well. There's more in there, but they look pretty.
Good point.
They were very
black
healthy
walnuts,
there.
that's fine by me.
Yeah.
Is the soil pretty, is it clay or sandy or?
In this area, it's
It's probably
clay.
clay. Yeah, it's not one.
Very thick herb layer in the back, grasses and ivy,
Oh, neat.
gill of the ground, those kind of things, but healthy.
Yeah, so
Well, oaks are always good, you know, if there's room. They thick bark and, you know.
Yeah.
You know, they don't get too big too fast.
so swamp
Strong wood.
white oaks maybe, or
Any of them, I mean, an assortment, you know, shingles,
Shumard.
sawtooth, shumard.
Okay, several kinds of oaks. Anything with a thick hide,
Thick hide, yeah.
because it probably is going to be a high traffic area for pedestrian traffic as well as cars in there. Okay, well, the secretary will.
What about a locust? That would be less, skyline? Is that-
Shade Master.
Shade Master. That might be, I mean, it's just a thought. They might appreciate the easier cleanup in the fall.
Yeah.
And
It's a
it
good
have the
suggestion.
advantage of being a leguminous tree, which might do better in.
Yes, that's true. And this is probably a wet site because it is
really?
downhill
Oh, okay.
From, let's see, Christ the King and
Slightly down slope.
yeah, down
I've never
slopes.
seen locusts, you know, not like any site.
So we're recommending weeds then.
What about the sycamore? Is that a good one to put in there?
Oh, okay.
Probably towards the back it would do
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
How many trees are required total? Is it 4 times
Well, they want
60?
4. We need 4 on each site. We're only going to. They're going to plant 7 in total.
Okay, 7 in total. Oh, the one to count, yeah.
Why don't we put sycamore on the list as another possibility?
Yeah, when it comes time to ordering plant, of course, it's nice to have a selection when the nursery says that's not available, that's not available. So, okay, are there any other things for this? Any suggestions?
It's damp, especially the swamp white oak.
Yeah, okay. Well, as soon as the secretary has the information in,
Okay, I got locust, sycamore, and oak. There was something before that, wasn't there? Something you mentioned.
black walnut.
There's two walnuts there already. They're doing well.
We don't want too many of the same.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And we'll put together a recommendation and give it to the code enforcement office for sending to the property owner, or Mr. Valentour, I guess, really, in this case, it's an architect. So, then, we have, let's see, I distributed a large drawing, which we won't be able to really take any action on or review of because there's more information needed, but this gives you a sense, and some people have gone and visited 20 and 22 Oak Street, not had an opportunity to get down Kurtz, 21 Kurtz. These are all sites, all houses and parking lots that are being developed by Mr. DeLuca. And Chuck Miller, you have something to help, please? If you could, please.
And this request here from Mr. DeLucas, that I haven't been much help to them because of just getting here, and the ordinance has changed since I worked with it 3 years ago, and I wasn't of much help to them, and I apologize to the board, but they need to get on with this project because school's getting ready to start, and we need to get it done before the students start coming back. And any help that you could do with the DeLucas would be greatly appreciated on my part, as not being familiar with the ordinance and not being much help to them.
Can I ask a
Thank you, Mr.
question?
Miller.
Sure.
It shows a driveway going from one to the other. Are we to consider this as one property, or are we to consider
it's
this
still
as
going to be two
properties?
Two
Okay.
properties, yes.
That's fine.
They're individual lot lines and two separate identities.
Okay.
But the entry to both parking lots behind the houses is by 22 Oak Street. There's only one entry, is there not?
Yes, but it's still two properties with a shared driveway.
Okay. There's a lot of those around Athens.
Yes, there is. Yes.
Does that mean they have to have the perimeter around the whole of each
Well,
property?
the first thing is that each site, I think, will require 2 trees.
Right.
Two
They
shade trees.
indicated the two trees there.
then there will need to be buffering between them and their neighbours. Now,
Sure.
since they own the two properties, I guess they can agree with themselves as to whether they have a buffer there or not. But they are required to have a buffer
One of
against
the questions that they asked me was, what trees should we purchase to put in there? And I didn't have an answer. And
We'd have to look at the site, I think, to be honest.
Did you get a chance, Mrs. McWilliam, to look at the site or anything?
Yes, a couple of us have gone and looked
Yeah,
at the
I
site.
looked at it.
And we need a little bit more information about property lines and infrastructure. I think there's some power lines, some high-tension power lines on the north side and maybe
And
the
the
east
north,
side,
right.
which limits what you can plant. You
Okay.
have to be under the power line kinds of things in those situations.
So that'll require some kind of dwarf tree?
A small,
Smaller tree.
like
Medium,
crab
then we have
apples.
to increase the number of trees
Okay.
Yeah.
to get the shade coverage we need.
David, do you think it's worthwhile to explain like the perimeter? Because that's always, maybe they didn't, with all the new people here. and
Oh,
everything.
under the new landscape ordinance, there is no requirement for planting or of a particular boundary to be placed around property as there is in the old landscape
Right.
ordinance.
It's a whole lot
And
easier.
so that has gone now, and the calculation of the required number of trees depends on the area of the property.
Okay.
There is a requirement where possible to plant trees at the front, as they've indicated on here, but they are counted then in with the trees that we're going to use for the whole site. So if they think that they should have 2 trees at the front, and we say there should be 2 trees for the site, then it looks like they are meeting the
Well, they're
requirement.
willing to meet the requirements.
Yeah.
And
The other thing is that they have 2 planting seasons, basically 2 years, to arrive at the full planting.
Okay.
So they haven't got to plant
Well-
them immediately.
I talked to the chairperson about paving. Now, the city's position right now is to pave these lots. And I understand that paving is not necessarily good in some areas anymore because of the water table for the underground water wells and what have you, but the position right now was to be to pave those lots. And
I think the only way to avoid that is if they wanted to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, we might support them in not paving
Not
it.
paving.
Yeah.
I think that would be
And
a
we have
reasonable
done
thing.
that in the past. There's a place off of Elliott Street that we supported
Okay.
keeping the gravel parking lot. If this is paved, there are 2 existing trees in the back that would come down. And so there's an even stronger argument, and they're substantial and look to be pretty healthy shade trees, probably cooling the house and the parking lot. So it would be really worthwhile to keep the gravel and make it a better gravel parking lot than to pave it, if that's at all possible. And we would encourage, I think, going to the Zoning Board of Appeals to try to do that.
But we don't want to forget that if lower maintenance, but there are possibilities for permeable paving that will allow water to go down so it
Leach through.
won't interfere with the water table, won't increase storm runoff. And it's worked very well in the East, in Europe, and in Asia. So it's worth looking into, I think.
well, yeah, we will do that, and I will work with the DeLucas, and if they want to pursue a variance for the zoning board, we will certainly do that. So let me know whatever extra information, and here again, I should already know, but I don't know the information yet. So if you help me through this one, I'll be ready for the next one. Okay? So,
Yes, no, we certainly will.
Okay,
First step is to
Thank
get a
you.
more accurate drawing.
Yeah, but first we do need a more accurate drawing. And in fact, my presentation of information is, thanks to my understanding of Xeroxes and mirrors, absolutely backwards. So this didn't help you. I was the person in charge of the Xerox machine. So we need a plan that has property lines on it, infrastructure about the power lines, and where you propose to put the trees out front. There is in the revised Title 37 at the Law Director's website the outline of what's necessary to have on the presentation of information. A north arrow, there's a paragraph that describes how to submit, basically.
I just found out Ann's cell phone number, so I'll be calling her about the tree.
Yes.
There's a lot of, I want to point out, there's a lot of power lines out front. It will be difficult to plant. There is an arborvitae that's growing there fairly well, but to get a large shade tree, there are a lot of power lines. And I'm calling the front where the houses are by Oak Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's, it is a very, the power lines are everywhere there.
Well, what we'll do, we'll just overlay the landscaping on top of the plat map for the properties, and then we'll have to meet that requirement, I think. Won't we?
Yeah.
That's been
Yes.
done,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's been done.
Okay.
So we look forward to seeing this revised with that information and with the 2 trees on it at our August 14th meeting.
August 14th?
Yeah.
Now, Alvy, you were saying 2 trees. If they have to be small trees, will 2 be enough?
Oh, that's right.
It would be 4 trees.
It would be 4 trees. If they're small trees, it would be
Yeah.
4 trees. Yeah, and it would be things like crab apples.
But we need to look at the site in detail.
Yeah, and we need a better presentation of information. Is there anything else?
I heard you talking, Dave was saying something about the increasing because of the small trees, the number will be increased?
Yes.
Did you
Yeah.
say how many?
Rather than 2, it would be 4.
Oh, it'll be
4 small
four.
trees as opposed to 2 large
And we're
trees.
looking at a maximum of 10 or 12 feet high, or?
Well,
25
they
feet
would
max.
grow to probably 20, 25 feet underneath the so when we're dealing with the high voltage cables of AEP, we
Sure.
can go to about 20 feet high to give them the 10-foot of clearance that they need underneath the lines.
Okay.
Okay, and people should also, and we need the same information, please, for Kurtz, 21
Sure, yeah,
Kurtz.
sure.
And people should go and look at these sites in advance of this. The maps, the plans should be given to the code enforcement office a week before our meeting, so 7 days beforehand. And
ready
Mr.
for
Miller
next
will
time.
then give them to us. Multiple copies are helpful, 5 copies are helpful, and they need not be sophisticated architect's plans, if something like that is with all the information.
If
This
that
is
overlaid on the plat map should
Yeah.
be good. Okay, we'll do that.
okay. Are there any other comments, guidelines?
Would the plat map have the infrastructure, any
No,
bearing
they'll have to put
lines?
that on themselves.
No, that's
But we would need that information.
You
Yeah.
want the tax card for the structure, you mean?
No.
The-
What we need is the height. We need the plat map with this design overlaying it, and then we want the high voltage cables marking on there as well.
Okay.
Also, if there are any major city utilities, sewer and so on, that are anywhere near this at all, because the Nick Carr that doesn't like us recommending trees to be planted right on top of his sewer and water lines.
Yes.
And an indication of north.
Yes.
Yeah.
North.
Which way is north?
Yeah, it makes a difference for what kind of trees or how things succeed. So, yeah, that description is in Title 37.
We'll have it ready.
Are there any other comments, questions about this? No? Okay, then that brings us to other.
And under other, I think what we'd like to do is just introduce the Commission to a plan that Mr. Bias is bringing forward for a development along Columbus Road called Hickory Creek. This is probably one of the largest developments we've ever had to consider, and it's quite a complicated site. So he provided us with a number of copies of drawings. I'm going to pass these along. I've got mine in a minute, so I'm all right. I've got mine. Bill, do you want to take over and try and help us? I think the best thing here is to give the commissioners an overview of what it is you're trying to achieve.
Well, and David, I really...
Without worrying about too much which landscape ordinance or how we're going to meet it. I think we have to understand your design goals in doing this.
And I'd first like to thank the commission for allowing us to appear before tonight, and we're not asking for any answers tonight, just a beginning of a discussion. I know we were kind of late in getting added to the agenda. This was something that I thought literally a former architect and an engineer had submitted some time ago. There were some, well, we won't even go into all that, but what you have before you is something I'm very excited to see is finally coming to the city of Athens on a 53-acre site. You're going to have a 100-bed, all private room, all private bath nursing facility. And the one wing over to the side is an assisted living wing. Now, the nursing home itself is each room, and I say again, private rooms are 400 square feet or right at 400 square feet, so they are quite large with their own bathrooms. The assisted living wing are about 800 square feet each. Mr. Ingram and I yesterday were able to go down to the site, and I was able to drive him around and showing the site, and I think until you see it, these plans are of limited value to you, so I highly encourage you and will make my time available at any time that you would like a field trip, either all at once or singly, to go down and see the site. Now, literally it is surrounded by trees. Well, let me say one other thing. The nursing home itself is being raised, or the area that the building is on is being raised out of the floodplain. Last fall, we got about 195,000 cubic yards of soil that is being moved and compacted to complete the site. Last year, we got between 5 and 10% of having all of it moved and compacted. Then the winter caught up with us and we didn't make it. We were even mixing lime with the soil, trying to get it done so that we could get the foundation and work all winter. We didn't make it. It's very unfortunate because we probably are now laboring under the wettest spring going into summer I've ever seen in my life. And the engineers there, every day that we are moving soil down there, there is a representative of geotechnical consultants down there that is measuring soil moisture, and the moisture has been so high that we have not even been able to start moving the soil yet this year, and we're into mid-July already. So that's more than a little bit disheartening, but we anticipate, I met with the EPA last week, that we can be pumping out of the borrow pits where the soil is coming from to for the lift, and came up with an acceptable plan of how to do that so no silt would end up in the river. You do see the sediment pond mentioned there. And I would anticipate, hopefully by the end of August at the latest, we will have the site complete. At the south end of the site, we are within 1 foot of being out of the floodplain. At the north end of the site, we are about 2.5 feet of being out of the floodplain. Yes, ma'am?
Which flood? Are you one in 500 years, one in 100 years?
100 year.
100 year.
Yes.
That same that we have managed to achieve in the last few years.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I would like to point out that literally all the access roads are being planned for being out of the 100-year floodplain, so I would not anticipate any of the problems at this facility that we will be laboring under at Oblenus if we do have a 100-year event. So I would anticipate that this facility would probably be a triage site for any type of huge medical emergency that would happen within the city of Athens. That's what the state emergency plans generally call for. So it's going to be certainly a state-of-the-art facility. Now, that's the reason I'm before you folks, and how we can make sure that we do the best job that we can on the trees that are planned for it. I don't know how to, and I'm sure I'm not the first person before you that thinks their site doesn't quite match the ordinance and that there's always going to be some reason that it shouldn't. And I'm going to look to you folks for help on the best way of doing this. When you look at, I guess, page 2, David, would that be the one that shows the whole site?
The one you've got in front of you is the page 2 that I attached to the very last page of these documents.
Mm-hmm.
And that shows, I think, the building laid over the whole property.
I would say that everything that is somewhat darkly shaded are trees. Because I know the site, and there are delineated wetlands. I believe it's saying 1.8 acres of delineated wetlands that came out of the year and a half that we have been working on this site. And that is almost all treed even. That is the dotted lines outside of the heavy lines. Inside of these heavy lines, behind the riparian area that follows the river around where the sediment pond is, most of that area now will end up lake. So that is obviously not an area that we're going to be able to plant a lot of trees in, but the view is beautiful from down there. When you are on this rise that we have created, looking in every direction with the possible exception of looking back towards Columbus Road, and it isn't that bad, you are literally surrounded by trees and meadows. The wildlife down there is unbelievable. So with all of that in mind, I think the tree plan that you have on one of the other pages that I don't have before me is a professionally landscape designer developed plan that...
This is page 25 of the set. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, there's a sheet number, and it's 25.
And to be quite honest, if when I felt my conference call with the architect and the head of construction of Alexa, who oversees this, I think what you may have there is a cut and paste plan that probably does not address our ordinance, and feel free to tell me how we need to change that to do it. David had some great ideas when I went over with him just yesterday on where we want to preserve views and looking out of rooms in this direction. I definitely do not want to plant so many that people are not going to be able to see the lakes and the wildlife and the trees and the river area and all of that. And he let me know that the small trees that we were planting already there need to be replaced with a larger tree that we will be able to look under, and I hope those are the kind of ideas that you let me know that we need to do. But this is a nursing home design with sans the assisted living section of it that is being built in not Delaware, Ohio, but I'm sorry, I'm coming out from Hilliard, I'm sorry. And I think the landscaping plan that you're looking at, while professionally designed by a landscape architect, is not for this site, and I look to you for some guidance on that. So those are my opening comments. Where do we go from here, folks?
Well, I think the one thing that you pointed out to me was that as you look out of these windows, you'd like to preserve the vista. Mm-hmm. And that's obviously a design concern that we need to try and bear in mind as we're trying to make the landscape ordinance, whichever one we use, because I'm still not convinced that the old one is the best one for this site. I've been trying to work the numbers on this to see how best we can come up with it, because the problem is we can't split it between the two. We have to make a decision as to which one it is. And I think this is probably one of the largest sites that we ever had to consider. It's also a little bit complicated.
I cannot imagine another parcel of 53 acres within the city of Athens that's ever going to be developed again.
One thing that
we'll annex something, but I don't know what else would be here.
One thing that we will need to know is the proposed area of that lake, approximately, and also the area of the wetlands, because I think those are two areas where we should subtract that away from the area that the new landscape ordinance would actually require to be planted with trees, because I don't think it's reasonable. And it was certainly never intended that we require people to plant lakes with trees. Because it talks about permeable surface, and I think it didn't mean lakes and rivers at that point. And so as the property line extends out into the river, again, we should probably exclude the river from being in there. And the way, if we were to go with the new landscape ordinance, or even the old one, and if we start trying to account for existing trees, then we should use the rule of thumb that there needs to be 30 feet between each of the trees. And, you know, there are an awful lot of trees down there. I have no idea how many. I think it runs in thousands that we've got down there. And
the meadow area itself had always been used just to plant corn, or at least in modern times. So, you know, that area itself has not had trees where we're lifting that out and where the lakes have been determined. So the riparian area, which runs all along the river there, and hopefully, at least the former mayor and everybody I know, hopefully the present administration, are going to support a spur to the bike path that will be going back there, and the owner is certainly willing to give any type of right-of-way that is needed for that purpose. He's very excited about doing that. He would like any type of demonstration project that Ohio University's botany department or any other would be interested in having paths to show off and showcase the wetlands. We'd like those kind of things to be included in anything that you'd like done with us too.
As a point of reference, do you know what the 100-year flood contour is in this area?
It is certainly on most of the maps that are here, but
yeah, I can see
out of
it,
the
right.
20-some pages of plans that go with this.
I think I found it on that on the
I want to say
sheet.
567 or something like that.
It looks like it's between 660 and 670.
That's it. That's it.
Somewhere in that range.
If you look at what it is, where at the front door, I think you're 2 feet above the top thing right there.
I think Lee had some comment. Lee, you were...
Yeah, I had a couple questions. How many stories is this going to be?
1 story.
1 story.
Everything's 1 floor.
All right, so if the trees are planted and they're shade trees, shouldn't you be able to look out through those windows and the canopy would be above the line?
Yes.
The sight
Absolutely.
line?
In fact,
Yeah.
that's what we were talking about. I have some pin oaks on my own home that's 10 feet around at breast height, and that's the effect I hope that we end up with here.
Right, except pin
Except
oaks,
pin
because
oaks.
of their pendulous habit, probably would interfere with sight lines.
Well, they can be pruned up as the
They-
university has.
They
done.
can be pruned up, but the branches that are up there keep coming down.
Yeah,
so-
You're absolutely correct, and I'm not married to pin oaks.
Right, right. No, I mean, I love them, but if we're worried about interfering with the view,
There are probably other trees that would be better.
Yes.
No, once I pointed out to him that the trees that are listed in the legend over here weren't really suitable as tall shade, large
Right.
shade trees.
And they would-
that you would be able to see underneath a large shade tree.
right,
And these trees would tend to block the view because they were shorter.
right. And I just had another question. So are you saying that the only existing wetland is the one that's shown on here, and none of the site that's going to be built on is now a wetland? Is that correct?
Underneath one of the wings of the nursing home, part of the building, there was less than 1/10 of an acre that the owner paid, I believe, $19,000 to create other wetlands in the Scioto River Valley in order to eliminate
So they made
that
a trade.
wetland. Yeah. So, yes, there was some slight, but all rules were followed. It was literally a wetland that was created when the city of Athens repaired a sewer break there, left dirt piled up in a certain way that allowed certain wetland plants to take hold, and that was a $19,000 expenditure to, but the only wetlands that are left on this property, I think it's saying 1.8 acres existing wetlands. And it's kind of neat to walk down and look at. I'd be happy to take any of you over that.
And are you planning to bury power lines, or will they be?
We have
buried?
already absorbed that expense. All utilities coming to the site are buried. When the city had to redo their sewage pump station down there, and we had to get electricity to it, it was another $25,000 worth of expense to, when we brought that electricity in, for us to go ahead and share the cost with the city to bury the power lines then. So all power lines will be buried.
There was one small point in the parking lot design. This would be considered to be an interior parking lot because it isn't up against the perimeter of the property, and as such, it's supposed to have 10 or fewer parking spaces contiguously. And I think at least one place you've got 12 or 13. That, as I say, it's a minor quibble, but that's something that under the old landscape ordinance caused people a lot of grief at times because we had to figure out ways around it. I don't know how firm you are with it and determined
I think
to
it's
have
already
that.
been approved by the city, so somebody must have missed out one, David, is all I can say.
Yeah, they did because yes, Chuck Noll's predecessor would have should have noted that one. Yeah.
In fact, I think they had it changed to what you see before you. I do know that early on, the parking places was something that people talked about back and forth with the architect.
And the street that runs right in front of the property line there, your property line is shown going right up to that street edge. Is there a right-of-way that extends into your property, or?
Well, as weirdness would have it, that street is Circle Drive. And believe it or not, prior to 1950, you came down Circle Drive on your way to Columbus. Has anyone been here long enough to remember any of that? And underneath that, it is a brick street. It is a platted, dedicated street in the city of Athens that we are applying for access grant money from ODOT to upgrade that street because people have spoken to the need for two entrances. When you have a healthcare facility such as this that is bringing well over 150 jobs to the city, when you have a shift change, if everybody is going in one direction there, and you have people backing up, and there's not even a street light there on Columbus Road, and you would need to get an ambulance in or out, you may have a problem. So for all the emergency reasons that I think everybody could understand, we are looking at upgrading, and fortunately there is that whole street, there is some grant money that is available, and last Monday, I believe it was, the Service Safety Director made application, and we feel very positive that we will receive the grant money to have street lights, sidewalk, and a new road in front of the place built to ODOT something to specifications.
So anyway, just to confirm, there isn't a right-of-way that's going to go onto your property, or there isn't a pre-existing right-of-way there. The right-of-way for that street is what's shown on this drawing.
It's a platted street.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Called Circle Drive. The address of the new facility is 10 Circle Drive. The buildings that have been built along in front here, you know, what used to be the old Sears building and the office building there, and a couple of those, they presently have a Columbus Road address. Whether that stays the same or not, I don't know, because as you can see, even in front of those buildings, it is called Circle Drive. It's a street that has not been used heavily, obviously, for a long, long time now, but it continues to remain a platted street.
Now, on sheet 2, it appears to show your property line crossing into Columbus Road. Is that just a slip of the pen when they put the two over there, or is that...
Well, I hope that would not cause our owner to have to maintain Columbus Road.
No.
From what I've seen over the years being at the city, the right-of-ways are all over the place in town. In fact, if you would look at Washington Street, there are houses there that many of the front porches are well within the city right-of-ways.
Yeah.
Right-of-ways and streets are not exactly where they ought to be in many, many examples, and my guess is the black line is correct, and the street probably shouldn't be exactly where it is, and I wouldn't expect anything to change because of it.
Okay.
So that the developers will probably give the city an easement, so that.
I would anticipate that not be necessary. If the city would request it, I have no doubt.
I just know, on my street, we had to. I mean, we didn't have to, but, it was.
You live on Sunset Lake?
No.
Okay.
It's all over town, the problem.
There's quite a few examples like that within the city. It's pretty overwhelming. I don't know if it's because we're on slip-prone soil or not. I do know that the surveyor and the engineer feels very strongly that the lines are exactly where they should be. Now, I'm certainly not an engineer, nor am I a surveyor, so I'm certainly not qualified to speak to it, but I have no doubt, knowing the attitude of the owner, if the city needs something taken care of there, we'd be more than happy to address it.
So at this stage, you're inviting us to come out and visit.
I would very much.
In terms of timelines, when do you think you need us to make at least a preliminary agreement? Because usually what happens with these big sites is we have to give preliminary approval, and then things progress and things change and so on.
And that's all I would ask for. I would love to see if we could have preliminary approval in August, at your August meeting. I'm leaving for a vacation next Wednesday, and we'll be back the following Monday, and other than those days, I don't know of any day that I could not be at your disposal.
Okay. So we'll discuss afterwards exactly how we'll make arrangements then. Okay. I think it would be useful if some other commissioners could actually go down there and have a look around and see.
I have to note that I'm recusing myself because I have too many connections with Hickory Creek. Are there any other observations, comments? Okay.
Can you think of anything information I can get to you?
Other than what I said, the area of the lake, and confirm the area of the wetland.
What about substitute species for the...
No, we don't need to worry about that yet.
David, you're familiar with the square footage of the facility itself?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's actually on sheet 1, the collection you've got. It matched the... I didn't see it there, and I figured it out, and I came out to very, very, very close to the number.
That gentleman's office has a copy of, all the plans. So anything that you need, I'm not sure if you give them a call or give me a call. I'm in the book. I'd be happy to get you the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Okay, when we're done rustling paper, we'll move on to the next item. All the commissioners got their copies. Thank you, Bill. Our next item of business, item 4, is the Shade Tree Commission website, and Anita Frederick is completing work on this, and Ron Forrest, I think, is ready for the submission of the material, although there are some steps of approval and a little bit more information. So Anita, if you would,
So
please.
yeah, that's the basic status, is that Ron is ready to have content submitted. And what I need to do before that is meet with Colin Wolseley. So I will be calling her tomorrow for a meeting. We need to approve emergency and non-emergency numbers that will be posted on the website, as well as set up a meeting for the content to be reviewed and approved. And actually, we didn't go over this specifically the other day, but I would also like to talk to her about what that standard operating procedure is for when we, especially on that first page, when we post new information and events, what is going to be that procedure is going to, and then I'll type that up and start a little binder of what we need to do, so that if I'm not around, somebody else will know what to do, or if anybody wants to post something, they can, and it's accessible. Other than that, one other thing I do need are some bios from new members, and we need to take a few pictures to add to the part of the site where we say who the commissioners are.
So would you like,
I can contact people individually, if that's all right.
okay, so Anita will be calling a couple of people who've not
I can
had
tell
their
you
photos.
exactly.
Yeah, and the bios are basically 3 or 4 sentences.
So Jared and Lee, I don't have one from you, and John, I don't need one from you. And then photos would be Albie and David and Emily and Jared and Lee and John. And I'll also need your bio and take a photo of you. Okay. And
Now
other
this-
than that, so this week, what I'd like to do this week is submit that content and have it approved, and then get everything over to, I'm sorry, next week, did I say this week? Next week, and get that all over to Ron. And then in August, I will come back to you and give you an update, and hopefully we'll go live. We'll have all the information we need.
Thank you, Anita.
But does anybody have any questions, or is there anything you want me to address and look into before the August meeting?
You will contact us, though, for this bio? Okay. Because if you email me, I'll email it back to you.
That would be perfect.
Yeah, that's
I
the
will
most
text you
efficient.
before we leave and get that email address. Is that
Okay.
Right.
So, yeah, Jared, some of our email addresses are, well, you should have a revised, new and improved string of addresses, but I think John's is changing, so there's one new one. Are there any other questions? Oh, everybody comb their hair, get ready for this. All right, thank you, Anita.
All right, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Well, Emerald Ash Borer, there is indeed some news about data has been, we've got data.
We have a copy of the data, and I think we need to decide what the next steps are. I can use that data to make an estimate of the number of trees that the city is facing, removal and replacement and so on. Clearly, you'd like to do a complete survey of the city. I don't know where we are in terms of doing more surveys and adding more data, but that's where we are at the moment. We have a certain fraction of the city done, predominantly the east side. We can then use that to project over the rest of the city what might be needed to be done. It'll have certain limitations on it as an estimate, but at least it'll be an estimate. I don't know how quickly the current mayor wants to get an action plan together. The previous mayor did ask us to do this, and we came up with some broad rules and guidelines as to how we might proceed, but he in addition wanted to get an estimate together of the liability for the city. How many big trees are going to have to come down, and how would we do that?
And there's about 150 on that list,
Yes,
correct?
but only a small fraction of them are really big trees.
Yes, that's true.
And we get about 20%, I believe, of the city limits.
I don't know, but yeah, it could be. It
I
could be as
have,
much as
I
that.
have the grid at my office.
Well,
so which,
included in that package was a photograph
Oh, good,
or
that's right.
a figure of the city grid, I think. And I was just simply going to count up the number of squares that they covered and
yeah.
divide it by the
it's-
total number that we've got, and that'll tell me what the fraction is. And
Yeah.
it could be to 20%, but I haven't actually done that yet.
Well, and we do, there is a Hocking College student who I've been working with just one day a week. And the poor guy, he did get lost last Tuesday. I couldn't be with him. And he, because Athens, there's no straight streets. But so we are trying to do grid at a time. And so if you guys have ideas or mathematically, what I was trying to do for him is give him the grids with straight streets on them. But I'm wondering if I should give him go up to Canterbury and the south end, because I know there's a lot of ash trees up there. And we have not done any inventorying up there. And so I don't know, I'm open to suggestions. I think, I've got 6 more 8-hour days with him, so
I mean,
you do a lot.
The more you do, the better. The bigger the variety you do, the better.
Okay.
Doing it all would be best.
Okay.
I mean, those are
Choosing an area where you think there is a large amount of ash
Yeah.
would be good.
Don't you think?
yeah,
I mean, I'm open
Canterbury
to
has a lot.
Yeah.
right?
Canterbury,
Yeah.
Canterbury.
Mulligan, Canterbury,
Longview.
Okay.
the berries.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
the bear-
difficulty in that area is I'm not sure we know the right of way very well. And so you may have to go to Chuck to help us with that, because I do know that, for instance, Mulligan has got, I think, a pretty restricted right
Oh,
of way.
good. The
So-
smaller the better. That's
so
what I'm
trees-
for this.
you may find trees there that aren't our problem.
Okay. All right. All right.
Well,
Well,
now-
just help your. I mean, if you guys have any ideas, just email me.
If you go to an area, with a lot of ashes, and you're trying to use this as part of the overall estimate, will that
It's going to
skew
bias
it?
it. Yeah, it'll skew it.
Skews things, yeah.
But you can argue, well, it's probably better to get the bad news and just proceed improving the survey as you go along. I mean,
Okay.
essentially what we're doing is we're sort of zeroing in on a target, and by covering more and more of the city, we're going to get eventually a better and better number
Yeah.
towards the end.
Now, since we recorded information about power lines, will we be able to use that as part of our
Yes.
presentation, right?
Yes,
Okay.
because there we should be able to hopefully enlist AEP's help in
Assistance, right.
removal if we have to go that route.
Okay.
Of course, if the little bugs can be persuaded to eat
Be
these
eaten by
emerald ash borers, then we've solved the problem. Is there any news on that front? Are there any
I haven't
natural
heard a thing.
predators
I
coming
haven't.
up at all?
Well, you heard those two. But
Yes.
two
Yeah,
was.
yes.
I haven't heard anything more about those. So.
Jared, plant biology, if you hear anything?
It's going to get here. There's little we can do about it. It's just one of those things. It's going to happen.
I've been waiting for the gypsy moth all this time, remember?
It's slowing down, but it's, who knows, as things get a little bit warmer, it's just coming. I've heard Forest Service talk about it, and they say despite what efforts that you take of cutting down trees and doing things like that, the most it can do is slow, and you might slow it down. And it might take another 20 years, but eventually it's in their estimation, it's just going to happen.
Yeah. And I think at the moment our proposition is we don't plant any more ash trees. Where ash trees are questionable, we should remove them. And then once we know exactly where we are with the small trees that could be removed and replaced, they'll be the first on the line.
What do you mean by just remove them before they're infected?
No,
Or wait till they're infected and showing
No,
signs of decline?
No, where we've got trees that are questionable at all, but because of other factors,
Oh,
they should
just
be
get rid of them now
because sometimes Anne will say, well, this tree is in decline, but it's got some life left in it, and we might well say, well, let's leave it. This, if it's an ash tree, might actually cause us to say, no, let's get rid of it.
I understand.
But wasn't there also a feeling that if we remove some of the young ash trees that are a matter of not exactly snipping, but it's not inexpensive, it might be better did I make that up? Or
No, that was
to go ahead and get
part
rid of those
of our draft plan. Yes.
rather than wait 10 years till
Yeah.
we have to.
In other words, the
pay a
small
lot of
ones,
money.
because they're cheap to remove and replace, it would be reasonable thing to start doing that.
And not just money, but we're removing small trees that are not providing that much shade. So their potential, not their potential, but their current oxygen producing carbon dioxide removal is not so great. So in terms of the urban forest, it's not such a big impact to remove the small ones.
Now, the thing that the previous administration wanted to be alerted to was this potential problem that if infestation occurred here, we might lose a lot of trees within 3 years. And so they wanted to know, if that happened, could they afford to remove all those trees in 3 years, or would we have to start taking action before the infestation is here, because they simply couldn't afford to do it in 3 years. We'd need 10 years to do it. But until somebody has a number, which hopefully we can have now, at least an estimate,
Closer, yeah.
we should be able to feed a number into the city and say, look, it'll cost you this much, and if you can afford to do this in a 3-year period, then it isn't really a problem until it arrives. If this looks like a 10-year expenditure, then we may have to take action before the end of ash water gets here.
I have to say, like the more I've been looking at ash, just since this EAB came to light, in a way I think some of the towns, in Appalachia are better off because there is more of a diversity in the plantings here. And frankly, you guys have done less planting than most of the developed parts of the state. I mean, there are places in Findlay where they've got whole neighborhoods lined out in ash trees that they spent, they've had a 40
Dutch
house.
elm went through and they replaced it with ashes.
Exactly. And so you guys didn't really, you didn't have that much of a change in your landscape, you know what I mean? So in a way, let's learn from their mistakes and just keep kind of plucking the different species in when we can. And
Well, now, at this point, are we considering only trees in the right-of-way? What about parks?
Parks are also to be included, but they're of less of a concern, because if the infestation occurs there, unless they're actually in areas where people are going to be, then the trees can fall over.
Well, I'm thinking of all the nice ash trees that are growing so beautifully in front of the community center.
And they're in the inventory. They were inventoried,
Okay,
so I
okay,
think,
good.
if my memory serves me, there's 14 of them.
Okay.
Some of them have native borers, and those would be, my way of thinking, as Lee said, let's get rid of them now and put some oaks in there, some lindens.
Put a variety of trees.
Yeah, while there's, because prices are only going to get higher for tree, gas isn't just, it's going to get more and more expensive to do everything, include plant trees. So I think that would be one place where I think we could do a lot of good.
You mean just cut them down all at once? Or it might be, I don't know what the projected estimate, but it might be like 10 or 15 years before it's here, or what, a little bit more about it.
I just think it's such a prominent spot. I mean, they're at,
take out a couple of the ashes, plant other ones, and then kind of do it over a course of maybe 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow that we're finding. We're doing these surveys now, but it's not here yet. And even when it settles in, it's going to take a little bit of time for it to, but it seems a little bit, they did this a lot of in southeast Michigan when I was there, and there was a lot of ash. I was in areas where I started, and there was ash trees, and when I left, they were all dead, and they were just cutting everything down. There was a problem. Here, it seems like we still have a little bit more time, and it might be, I think it's a good policy to start maybe removing some of these things, but not doing it all at once.
Yeah.
Maybe, so
Right.
you're not going to have a bare, unshady spot,
Yes.
but maybe we can start, 10% or, I don't know.
We can't afford to do it all at once.
We only plant about.
But I'm talking about this. The
I just meant the rec
community
center,
Okay.
for 14 trees, we could, again, hypothetically,
Yeah.
you plant, hopefully, the city plants in the fall, plants in the spring. If those, to me, that would be a good way to start, raises
Okay.
awareness. Yes, people might, I don't know, maybe that would cause political unrest, but we'd be replacing them.
The first
Yeah,
thing
but
we're going to
over
do
gradually.
is get the rec director to come and talk to us about the
Yeah.
parks anyway, because we've got some other concerns too. But this is one that we need to put on their agenda, because it'll be their budget that pays for the removal and replacement.
Yeah, well, good thinking. I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah, that's. Real quick, I did with all the talk about West State Street Park. I got a map of that, and we are inventorying all the trees in that park, including the new ones they planted, and even the dead ones. So, we are working on that too.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments on Emerald Ash Borer? Ann has a September tree care workshop coming up that is on September 25th. And that's at, tell us the location, the time,
This is the annual Southeast Ohio Tree Care Conference. It'll be September 25th at the ODNR headquarters. I've got, I think, 5 or 6 speakers lined up to talk about a variety of urban forestry and grounds maintenance issues. It's geared towards people who are maintaining public space, whether you're mowing the grass or responsible for the trees or any of the infrastructure. I think there'll be something of interest. So there'll be lots more to follow. You'll be hearing so much about it. So thanks.
if you go online, you can find information at the ODNR site.
Not yet. I haven't gotten all that organized.
Well, we might actually beat you to it with the Shade Tree Commission website.
Okay, I'll get to it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anita will scoop you. Is there anything else? Any other? Okay. People will have read their minutes of the June 12th, 2008 meeting, I hope. If you haven't, we're willing to share here.
And Albie's given me some corrections
David?
already for the first part.
For your... Okay. So I've made my corrections.
Did you write a letter to the
No, I did not.
people?
Not yet. So that has to be done. Are there any... Any corrections, additions? This side of the commission has beat that side of the commission, I'm reading.
It's not a competition.
Are there any corrections or additions? Somebody want to move to accept the minutes as, there was an amendment I made about sheltering arms, that we denied permission to remove city trees and gave permission to prune those trees.
Have you heard anything?
No. But they have permission to plant. So that was the correction.
The property at the corner of Congress is 85 North Congress.
That's another one.
correction.
And I contacted Ryan Pearson from the Edge Group twice, and he didn't call me back.
Okay, we'll keep posted on that.
Yeah.
Would somebody like to move to accept the minutes as amended, please?
to accept the
Davidson moves. Anybody second?
I second it.
Is all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are accepted as amended. And our next meeting will be Thursday, August 14th at 7 p.m. here in City Council chambers. Please note the meetings are on the second Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. And we do have an idea of a couple things on the agenda next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Albie.